Okay, everybody, it's just gone 2 o'clock, so it's time for me to open this hearing session into the examination of the South Tyneside local plan. For those of you who haven't attended previous sessions, to introduce myself, my name is David Spencer, and I'm the planning inspector appointed by the Secretary of State to carry out the independent examination of the submitted plan. Can I just check before we carry on too much further? Can people hear me okay in the room? Yeah, I hope you can see me as well. Can I please, timely reminder, please ensure that mobile phones are switched off or on their silent settings, please. And for the benefit of those who haven't attended previously, can I please invite the council to take us through the usual housekeeping matters? Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon everybody. We're not expecting a fire alarm, so if alarm does sound, please can you make your way to the nearest fire exit, which is just on the far side of this room, and then make your way to the far side of the hotel car park. Toilets are just outside this room, just across the corridor. Please note there's cables taped to the floor, so please be careful when you're moving around the room. And also the hotel operates a park and eye system, so if you have parked in the car park, please ensure you've entered your registration details at reception.
Thank you for that. Can I check, is anybody here present from the local press this afternoon? No. Now these sessions are being recorded by the council and live streamed, so there will be a record of events for those who've been unable to attend or wish to observe remotely. Whilst that's going on, can I just check with does anybody else wish to make their own separate recording of this afternoon's session? No. Okay, well these are meetings, hearing sessions that are held in public, but it's only people who are seated around the table who have exercised their right to be heard. So I'll only be hearing submissions from those, as I say, who are at the table, who've made representations on the plan. And hopefully everybody here this afternoon is for Matter 5, Issue 4, and it's land to the north of Town End Farm, which is in policy SP7 of the submitted plan, and its site reference GA3. I'll be leading what I hope will be a structured but relatively informal discussion. I'm keen that people have their right to be heard. It will be based on the agenda that I've previously published. And that goes back to various matters and issues and questions that I identified back in May of this year based on the various representations that were made on the plan. So it's not necessary for people to read out what they previously provided in writing back in January, March of last year when the plan was published for consultation. One of the things I'm always keen to explore at these sessions from those who don't consider that the plan is sound or legally compliant is to understand what needs to be changed in relation to the plan. So it might be some people's view. Mr. Sendall, from your side of the room, that this site, it shouldn't be included in the plan, but I will be interested to explore whether there are more detailed policy wording changes that I need to consider. I won't be coming to any kind of dramatic conclusions in this room. I want to reflect on what's been said, take things away, and if there's anything further that I need from the council, as it's their plan, I'll liaise with them through the programme officer if I need further information in respect of anything. Are there any questions at this stage around just broadly how these hearing sessions work? No. In which case, for the benefit of the recording and for other people who are in the room observing, you all now know who I am, but I'd like to turn to my right and invite Mr. Shadaravian to kick off for the council's team this afternoon, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. My name is Paul Shadaravian, KC, acting for the council.
Good afternoon, I'm Deborah Lamb, Operations Manager for the Spatial Planning Team at South Tyneside Council.
Rachel Cooper, Senior Plan and Policy Officer at the Council.
Matt Clifford, also a Senior Planning Policy Officer at the Council.
My name is Trevor Mail, I'm Service Lead for Strategic Transport at the Council.
Lucy Routledge, Historic Environment Officer at the Council. Katie Rumble, Development Director, Helen's Land Limited.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chris Smith, Planning Director at Lichfields on behalf of Helen's Land. So we're also accompanied by Dr. Nick Bunn from Tetra Tech and Mr. James Streets from OS Ecology, who we may invite to the table just to deal with some of the matters later on the agenda.
Richard Garland, Managing Partner, GFW, here representing the Jacobson Trust. Thank you.
Peter Sendall, resident of West Bolton, and if my voice sometimes goes funny, it's the effect of having to take morphine.
Thank you. If at any time, Mr. Sendall, we need a break or take time, just indicate and we can take a short adjournment. Thank you. If I should also say, if at any point, I mean, if you want to sort of just make a state, I'm going to try and run a discussion covering sort of various kind of themes. Hopefully you've seen my agenda. If you feel, no, I want to just make a particular statement, and that's me, and I'll leave at that point, you're welcome to do so as well, but you might prefer or want to stay in and sort of hear as much of the discussion as you choose. So I'll leave it to you as to what you'd like to do.
Well, I would like to make a, sorry, I keep forgetting, oh, it is on, okay. I would like to make a short statement at first, if I may, before the start.
I will accommodate that, and then we will work into the agenda. Obviously, I've read your representation that you made back on the plan, so I don't necessarily need that read out to me, if that was the intention.
No, that wasn't. Now we've explained it. No, it's not the intention.
Okay.
It'll be sort of short addendas, I think.
Okay.
That's what it'll be. This is my third local plan over the years, and I possibly at 79 it may be my last. I hope not, but we'll see what happens. I was a member of an environmental care group previously when the last two were held. This time I have donated to the crowdfunding at East Bolton for their attempts to prevent what they don't want. And I don't know, to be honest with you, whether they have said anything at all to help West Bolton and this particular site. If I may just very quickly say, when I was born in the village, it was virtually very, very little here. There was a very small amount of social housing in Hall Gardens. And the area we're talking about was, I had two friends in the houses that were there, and I knew Mr. Lockie, the farmer at Lockie's farm, personally, and it was absolutely wonderful. It's the description that everyone says that young people should have the opportunity to have. Somewhere to play, somewhere to walk, somewhere to enjoy wildlife and the countryside. And that has gradually been eroded in the Boldens. And this, I feel, is just in completely the wrong place and would, to me, totally destroy, which I've said in my representation, destroy that part of West Bolton. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if you can signal to me at any point, Mr. Sendall, if you need a break or to Annette, the programme officer, and then we will seek to accommodate that within this session. We're due to be here for the afternoon. Whether we need to sit all the way through to 5 o'clock, which is when I generally want to draw a line on things, we'll see. But thank you for that introductory remarks, Mr. Sendall. Obviously, we're here for the site at land at Townend Farm. as I said at the start of this session, it was put in as it's in as a proposed allocation for 400 homes within the submitted plan. The evidence base, excuse me, was provided by the council on plan submission. There have been various updates, but at a relatively late stage prior to these examination hearings, I received correspondence from the GF White on behalf of their clients in respect of their land interest within the wider GA3 site. I've now subsequently received a statement of common ground between the two principal parties here before me. I appreciate there's also a land interest, I think, with the church commissioners on this wider site, entered into with the council. I have item 2 on my agenda. I've read the statement of common ground, but whether I'd invite the parties, I don't know who's going to kick off on this from either GF White or whether it's Mr. Smith for Lichfields, on where you kind of consider matters to currently be as we sit here today, whether the statement of common ground moves things forward, whether there remains a potential issue that the examination needs to apply itself to.
Thank you, sir. I'm happy to go first if you'd like me to. So I think to describe our position, and it has moved on since our letter, as you've seen by the statement of common ground, but to describe our client's position, it's well rehearsed under paragraph 36C that to be sound, the plan needs to be effective. To be effective, it has to be deliverable. This site, as this is the case with a number of strategic sites that I'm involved in, is in a multiple of ownerships. As we've identified, there are 2 major ownerships between the trust land as promoted by Helen's and my clients, the Jacobson's trust land in the middle of those 2 parcels, which are both self-promoting. So as a whole, the allocation looks entirely sensible from a planning point of view. If you take out the red land in the middle of the plan, which is provided to you in the statement of common ground, you're effectively left with the other major ownership being 2 entirely separated parcels of land. We are in a position where we don't have any formal commercial terms agreed between the parties. Our client has, up until the 17th of June, carried out a joint promotion with Helen's, and the principle of the site, the entire site still being included between us, as you've seen, is accepted. What my client, on the basis of several last-minute discussions and discoveries prior to the 17th of June representations being submitted, since that, as made clear in our letter, they are entirely clear that if their land is not developable independently or is subject to ransom, then it won't come forward for development and it won't be available or deliverable. We appreciate that elements of this stray into commercial agreements between landowners, however, our position on it quite clearly is that it does affect planning deliverability, and our client's position on that, it being available for development, is absolutely clear. When we then look at the submission draft of the local plan and the key criteria of GA3, there was nothing in there to harmonise with the framework document, which sets out the objectives, the constraints and the principles and an indicative layout for the site. There's also nothing in the proposed criteria which deals with the site coming forward either as independent parcels or indeed a number of planning applications within one ownership. What we do appreciate is that the council, in drafting that plan, as per our clients until the 17th of June, perhaps weren't aware of what the actual position is between the parties, so we understand the background to the plan. However, given what we're faced with now, the proposals that we've put forward are intended on a purely planning basis to make sure that this site comes forward as an entire allocation. And it's our position that without those criteria, there is a very, very material chance that it won't come forward in that way. And had that be the case, I don't think that we would be here talking about it. So I'm pleased to say we've had several discussions offline resulting in a statement of common ground, and that is agreed between the two major landowners between you now, which I think is probably a huge step forward from where we were before. There's still outstanding issues that we need to resolve between us, but I think if the allocation comes forward as required and as proposed, then I think it addresses our planning concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, that's helpful. Mr. Smith, is there anything further you wish to add on behalf of Helen's Land Limited?
Yes, sir, and just briefly, I think it's one that I think we're pleased to have reached a situation where we did on Friday with the Statement of Common Ground. I think, just to recap, it is the second largest site identified within the plan, so it's not unusual that you do find multiple land ownerships. I think the council probably testify to this, that it's been relatively harmonious throughout the number of years on the various call for sites exercises and the representations received in relation to the consultations on draft versions of the plan. And I think this is just an element of commercial matters that I think you've will probably have seen that in a slightly unorthodox fashion has been aired in front of not only the council but you, sir, as well. So, as I say, I think we're confident that the site as a whole, it remains very much the Helen's land preference, that it comes forward as a single application. And you'll see the text that's been incorporated into the Statement of Common Ground to that fact. So obviously, the Statement of Common Ground does conclude with some suggestions in terms of how the key considerations could be amended, just to reflect the agreements between the parties. But otherwise, in planning terms, I think we are now aligned.
Thank you. It is an interesting area because presumably, I have in my mind, did the council submit a sound plan based on all the plan making and preparation that the council undertook? And I'm assuming from the council's perspective, when the sites were promoted to you through the SHLA and other mechanisms, it was very much presented as a joint site and a deliverable site, and it's only at it's beyond plan submission that we're now faced, or we've had these kind of issues aired around its potential delivery. I have to be alive to that because from time to time these issues crop up about whether sites are genuinely deliverable, but I don't think there's any criticism of the council in terms of what it had in front of it and how it dealt with it up until the 17th of June.
The site has been promoted through the local plan process in good faith and based upon the representations made by landowners. So to be faced with this at the last minute actually is very concerning.
In terms of potentially moving matters on, both Mr. Garland and Mr. Smith have referred to the recent Statement of Common Ground. They're both pointing me already to proposed modifications within that Statement of Common Ground, presented, I think, at paragraph 7.2, which I think they're inviting me to consider as being necessary changes to the plan for plan soundness. Can I just understand, though, the council's position where at paragraph 5.6 of the Statement of Common Ground, it says it considers that these modifications are not necessary for soundness.
That is our position at the moment, bar perhaps one particular issue. That is our position. And that one issue is whether or not the site should be delivered as a comprehensive development. We would be happy to accept a requirement in the policy that the approach be integrated and comprehensive so as to ensure consistency and to preclude piecemeal development of the site. We do not believe that the eventual layout should be in conformity with the framework document. that is purely an illustrative exercise. It has no statutory significance, and of course things change over time. So whilst we are happy with a comprehensive approach to the delivery of the site, we do not believe it should be tied to the framework document. No other site, you will be aware, is tied to that document. Other than that, I will simply make this observation on behalf of the local planning authority. It is not part of this process to resolve land ownership issues and issues of value between parties through the local plan process.
Indeed, but if evidence comes before and during the examination that part of a wider allocation might not be deliverable or part of that process, I think I need to understand what that could potentially mean for the allocation, whether if that site was removed, whether the residual is acceptable and justified, effective, and meet all the other tests.
I perfectly understand the situation this puts you in and puts us in. At great and considerable public expense as well in the process. Having said that, there are other means of assembling sites as a last resort. I won't go into that now, but it's something which could be considered in due course if necessary.
Thank you. Mr. Sendell, are you okay?
Just a very small point. There's a parcel of land just off Downhill Lane, which was colloquially known as Story's Garden, which was always considered to be a private area no one knew who it belonged to. I don't know whether anyone is aware of that at all, about this site.
I don't know if there was a recent statement of common ground, Mr. Sendell. I don't know if you've seen it. It was published on Friday. It has a plan at the back of it. I don't know if there's a spare copy, but it covers the area, or it includes the area that was was covered by policy GA3. And what's being put to me is that there are effectively 3 land ownerships. The majority is it the Natras family? Oh, there's a spare copy coming to you. Okay, thank you. So the majority of the site is owned by is under the Natras family, including the the larger field closer to Bolden Hill, and then between the separate Natras land ownerships, there's a small area bounded by blue, which is owned by the church commissioners. And then the area we're talking about principally at the moment, Mr. Sendell, is the area edged in red, which is owned by, or has, it's the Jacobson Trust land. And the issue we're discussing is about how this all kind of comes together and is delivered as a whole, given the various land ownerships. I've obviously heard there from the council's clarification of its position at paragraph 5, was it 5.6 of the statement of common ground, that it doesn't consider that whole paragraph is necessary, that there's a kind of an alternative about including something around sort of comprehensive delivery. Perhaps I'll turn to Mr. Garland in the first instance as to whether that's sufficient, or whether, from your perspective, the way the plan can only be found sound with the entirety of not only just comprehensive or ensuring comprehensive delivery or something along those lines, but also requiring conformity with the indicative layout plan.
Thank you, sir. I'm not aware that we've got a specific wording which represents the council's position on that, which is unfortunate. I'm sort of trying to interpret that on the hoof, as it were. But I come back to the key criteria included within the plan allocation contain no specific guidance on how, or any principles around how the site should be spatially laid out and delivered as it comes forward, and even more so, or even less detail about how that would happen if it came forward as more than one planning application. And I appreciate there's no statutory basis to the site frameworks document, but it was a document prepared by the council in the preparation of the local plan. It clearly identifies the site in its entirety, the constraints, the opportunities, and then comes up with an indicative layout. Now, indicative means exactly what it says in the tin, but it does show you the design principles behind that site coming forward. Now, what we're seeking to do in our agreed representation is to say, well, those principles and general conformity with them should be part of any planning application that come forward from the site. Now, without that, and of course we're sitting here now, a planning application for the site could come in tomorrow, next year, 5 years. We have to be clear enough on what the principles are behind the allocation that will be acceptable when it comes forward. And again, I'm involved with a number of sites in multiple ownerships. Some of those criteria that we've put forward are actually replicated from other local authorities for their strategic sites, so that they're tried and tested. They're also based on the council's own indicative layout. So I think if there was a fundamental problem in those principles, we'd have expected that to be flushed out at that point in time. And our overriding point is, without that, how do the council then make a decision on a planning application if it comes forward independently on 2 parcels of land? Well, how do we know? The words I think used were comprehensive, but comprehensive is a principle that gives you absolutely no guidance as to what the layout should be looking like, and how you indeed determine a very important planning application which is going to come in on the back of it. And it's sufficiently vague for me to sit here and say I can't understand what that means for my client's land in the middle of this if an application is put in around them, not including them. At what level of comprehensive agreement do you need for that to be acceptable? We are all hoping, I hope, that the site will come forward together. But if it doesn't, and there's a material chance that it won't, for reasons we explained in our letter, we need to be clear how it would be dealt with if it comes forward as an independent planning application. And from the drafting in the key criteria and the words that I heard from the council before, I can't get to a position of comfort on that, and I come back to my client's position as if that's sufficiently in doubt, there's a real danger that their land just won't be developable.
Okay, thank you. If I turn to Helen's Land Limited, please. My understanding from reading the statement of common ground, you would have no issue or would indeed support this proposed modification to the policy?
Yes, sir. I think we are somewhere in between, in that time wasn't infinite. Come the deadline on Friday for agreeing the statement of common ground. I think it's a suggestion. We're open-minded about potential changes to that, but I think that I'll go back to what I mentioned a few minutes ago, in that it is right to recognise it's the second largest allocation within the plan. If we do look at like the Felgate allocation, for instance, there is an element of comprehensive planning built into the separate policy that is associated with that site. So I think that the principle of incorporating something around the principles of comprehensive master planning and delivery should helpfully account for any scenarios should the site come forward either as a single application or as multiple applications. I mean, there's key wording in there that we have work closely on in terms of, you know, should the site come forward either in phases or multiple planning applications. The important step is not to prejudice the wider delivery of the allocation. So I think the wording is there. It's all just about whether or not we are signposting specific reference to the site frameworks document, which I appreciate, obviously, Mr. Garland's point. Obviously, it's one of the things which is the guiding principles from which the site is laid out spatially before you, sir. But I appreciate also from the council's point of view, it was a document prepared at a midpoint through the preparation of the plan to kind of guide things, and it would be a little out of consistency with how the approach has been done on other sites.
Thank you. I'll come back to the council before I come to Mr. Garland. I mean, Mr. Shadarabian.
Okay, so it seems that we're getting to a point where there is resolution on the way we approach the site, which is we can modify the policy to require the submission and approval of, say, a master plan and a phasing and implementation plan, to which subsequent applications, including applications for the approval of reserved matters, must conform. So we can take a very similar approach to that which we're going to be taking to Felgate in that sense, and there's no reason why the two sites should not be treated the same in policy terms, or very similarly in policy terms. So I think that much can be agreed as part of the modifications process. So far as tying it down to the framework, again, I'm not sure that's entirely a proper thing to do, because it's impossible to know whether or not that's actually going to be an appropriate layout in the future. And flexibility is a key issue here in terms of delivery.
So I can, excuse me, just summarise those kind of last two submissions with more time. There might be a way forward in terms of it's not exactly this wording, but something, an alternative or something that's very close to what's presented in the statement of common ground, but it needs more attention.
I think there's commonality. I think it needs more attention, and it doesn't need to be tied down to the framework.
Mr. Garland, you were going to come back in a moment ago.
I think I agree that does it appear to be an element of commonality. We can clearly see that. I think accepting that the principles that things may change to a degree, I think I repeat back what I heard, it's I don't exactly understand what the concern is, though, linking it back to the framework document, which was the document behind the allocation, other than things may change. Well, if things may change and there's a comprehensive agreement that they've changed, then we're going to go along with it. I guess and we could build in a clause unless otherwise agreed between all parties, if that were the concern. I mean, I think it's probably one of the detail of what the proposal would be, and as I say, we have no sort of text in front of us to consider. Again, come back to there is commonality, but an overall master plan, phasing and implementation plan across the site, which works to genuinely allow all of the site to come forward to be developed, is the principle of that is effectively what we're trying to achieve. So the principle I don't have a particular problem with. It's how that is then worded and what degree of standing that has when we come to see a planning application or applications submitted. Because to satisfy this position for us, it has to be absolutely the defining principle of if a planning application comes in, you have to look at that criteria and say, does it match that? Because without it, 11 acres of the site won't come forward.
Going on to the second part of the proposed modification at 7.2 of the Statement of Common Ground, ensuring interconnectivity between the site and the established settlement of Town End Farm, etc., etc. Is that another part of the proposed modification that the council has issue with, or is it just to that first part?
We don't have an issue with interconnectivity and the principle of that. We haven't discussed the issue of vehicular interconnectivity with the adjoining authority, and it's something which we would need, I think, to discuss with them in order to ensure that they would be happy with that approach. But I think that's the extent of our disagreement with it at the moment.
Okay, I mean, obviously HOU2, which is the indicative framework document, which is one of the, seems to be one of the sticking points around the precise wording. I mean, that's evidence that the council produced in support of its plan. Unless I'm reading it wrong and looking at it wrong, one of the key vehicle routes appears to be coming in from Sunderland's administrative area, so presumably they do know about vehicular connectivity.
That's the same. I mean, that's the only issue. That's all I'm saying. Sorry, it's a minor issue.
You look perplexed, Mr. Garland. I think I take Mr. Shadowraven's point. I mean, this statement of common ground has been prepared in the last literally few days or week. Sunderland City Council, who are on the other side of the administrative boundary, have not been party to this process. So whilst there may be some agreement between the three parties here on that particular part of the proposed modification, it's whether you want to, from the council's perspective, if we go forward with this, something to kind of check or run with Sunderland, or whether it's explored as part of the proposed main modifications process.
Yes, we would like to check it.
Okay.
It might only be a minor point, but it's a matter of due process that we should discuss it with them.
Right. Before we get into some of the other issues, just so I'm absolutely clear in my mind on everything here, despite I might not be as frustrated as other people, but I thought this was a site, from everything I'd read up until the 17th of June, was being jointly promoted, been through the Shalar process, all checks, etc., that the council had undertaken. Can I just be clear from GF White, if we can't, or the the plan examination process can't find an appropriate main modification, you will formally withdraw the Jacobson Trust land, and it will be not available.
That's my instruction, sir. If we can't see a clear, robust mechanism for our land to be developable independently or as part of a comprehensive scheme, that my clients have quite clearly said it's not available.
I thought it was being. I thought the modification was being promoted on the basis that you wanted a comprehensive scheme, not a piecemeal one.
I think I'm back, Mr. Shadowraven, to my obsession with worst case scenarios, and if there wasn't a modification agreed between the parties that I felt I could put into the plan, I'm just checking with Mr. Garland what the kind of backstop position is between now and main modifications. He's telling me, I think in quite clear terms, the Jacobson land would not be included, or should not be included. I suppose that then leads me to, is there a sensible allocation that doesn't include the Jacobson land?
Which we need to give thought to.
Okay.
As a backstop. Sorry. Forgive me. Which we need to give thought to as a backstop. Because to jettison the whole allocation would be extremely prejudicial to this process at this stage. So we would have to look to see whether or not alternative scenarios INEA for the benefit of that land and for the benefit of the plan. And we also need to consider the use of other potential powers as well in terms of the land assembly, if that should be necessary in due course. Mr.
Smith, please.
Thank you, sir. I thought it was just worth adding our understanding of the situation as well. So as we understand it, I think we've made decent progress since around about the 17th of June deadline, and I think we have got to a position where, subject to there being flexibility within, whether it's a completely redrafted policy or something akin, or something around some amendments to give that flexibility. So it's a specific reference to comprehensive master planning and delivery, and flexibility for potentially the sites to come forward independently. That will be sufficient to address Mr. Garland and his clients' concerns. I should just make you aware as well that whilst we're not looking to undermine anything that has been said there, it'd be, I suppose, for want of a better word, daft if we weren't looking at worst case scenarios about what would happen should that land not be available. So I think in that case that is something we would have to pursue with the council, but I think we would need obviously a steer at some stage from you, sir, if we had to start looking down that route. But as it currently stands, Helen's remain committed to working with all parties to bring forward the site as it has been done over the previous years.
Before I come back to the council, Mr. Garland.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I want to reiterate that and then just pick up on something Mr. Shredder-Avon said before. We also want the site to come forward comprehensively. It's exactly what we're trying to achieve. And the reason we're taking the position that we have is it looked to us, emerging on the 17th of June, that might not be the case. And it's the council's role to pull forward a plan. It's your role to kind of deem that to be sound or otherwise. And again, I have a number of these after this stage when it goes into planning stage, which then stall and then don't look anything like what they're envisaged at the plan making process stage. And that's in its simplest possible form. That's all we're trying to achieve, is it to come forward together.
So, if I may, on that basis, I think there's every opportunity we can come to a solution.
I think my instruction to the council, although it does apply to Helen and Helen Land and to GF White, is statement of common ground that was provided on Friday. I don't think gets us completely there at the moment. It sounds like there is sufficient. If I did a diagram of a Venn diagram, I think there's sufficient common ground somewhere in the middle there to come forward with an amended or alternative wording for that particular part of the proposed modification. Maybe just further reflect on the second one in terms of interconnectivity. I appreciate the council wants to check in with Sunderland on that, which seems eminently sensible if there's a chance of avoiding difficulties at a later stage. I think we do need to kind of have this as a high priority, because I do want to kind of come to a view on all the sites I've been considering as part of the stage 1 hearings as the kind of then the basis on which to kind of look at stage 2 and what issues are in play. Because if there is a fundamental issue with this site, I appreciate people are now talking about alternatives. That may be something we worst case scenario again for the stage 2 examination. I'm not going to set a time frame right here, right now, but we are probably looking at a matter of a few weeks to try and get to the bottom of this. I appreciate we are, after this week, heading into holiday period. I've already heard lots of evidence of people who have been on holiday or are on holiday are not here. But I will liaise with the council through the programme officer, together with Helen's and Mr. White's, so we can just get this this particular matter over the line. Thank you for that. Right, that was just one item on the agenda, but it was an important one, I think, in terms of just understanding overall site delivery. I don't see the matter yet as kind of concluded. It obviously still needs further work, but that's helpful to understand that. So I'm going to move on to item 3 of the agenda, and it's around greenbelt impacts and compensatory improvements. This site forms part of, I think, wholly is it parcel SU1 that was looked at as part of the greenbelt review. I think, as I've done on previous sites, I think I'd like to give the council the first opportunity to kind of talk to that evidence, how this site has performed in terms of the overall greenbelt study work that the council has had undertaken in support of its plan, and then where that's led in terms of compensatory improvements being identified. Thank you.
Okay, so the site, as just mentioned, was assessed under parcel SU1 in the South Tyneside Greenbelt study. The site is assessed to perform moderately against purpose 1, 2 and 3, and have low harm against purpose 4. So overall the site does have a moderate harm rating to the greenbelt. It's noted that in the summary in Appendix C of the greenbelt study that it's mentioned that there are strong boundary features to this site, which is helps with part of the greenbelt assessment. Obviously, the Appendix C does also set out menus for enhancements and compensatory improvements to the site, and obviously notwithstanding discussions we had this morning around a further review of that. In terms of what's been incorporated within the key considerations are the point about access to other parts of this, of the land around the site, especially sort of referring to the landscape as being an integral part of the design, but particularly referencing landscape buffers to the north and creating defensible boundaries. It's also worth noting that within Appendix C, it does make reference as a compensatory measure to enhance access to downhole ore quarry, but you'll probably note that in the key considerations, that's something that we definitely are not taking forward, as we feel that would be have negative impacts on the existing local wildlife site adjacent to the proposed allocation.
Thank you for that. I'm not anticipating hearing any kind of contrary views on the greenbelt assessment from the bottom end of the side of the table opposite me. Oh, Mr. Smith.
No, sir. Just to clarify that I don't think there's anything really that I wish to add that isn't already in our hearing statement. So we concur with the council on that position.
But I'm mindful, Mr. Sendall, from reading your representations, I think you would invite a conclusion that there would be greater harm to the greenbelt, and I think you've recommended to me in your original representations where I would need to kind of look at the greenbelt impact from.
If I just may add further, the harm is seen as moderate. I think the lady said 3 and 1, which was inconsequential. But if you have somewhere where one item is just moderate, but then you start adding furthers in, to me it doesn't then mean that that site as a whole is moderate. It means it's gone up the scale somewhat because it's hit more than 1 point. That's the first thing I'd like to say. Secondly, with that, it's going to go right up to the A19. If you look at South Tyneside as a whole, at the Jarrow end of it, yes, it abuts other built-up areas. But at that point, basically between Jarrow and the sea, there's no other point where it abuts any built-up area. But of course, if you put this site there, then it certainly will, because it'll abut Town End Farm. So an important area like the border between the two, I feel it very strongly, in all sorts of ways, points to the fact that it should not be there. And I think in my statement I've made a lot of those points. Thank you.
So I think I think what you're saying to me, Mr. Sandel, is if I'm looking at say a number of harms that are moderate, your suggestion would be you kind of add those moderates together, and it will result in a higher harm.
Sorry, I certainly do. I mean, in other things in life that I've come across where this has happened, not in planning, I happen to see, I've always been told that it does lead to a higher degree of harm. And that's the point I wish to make.
And just so I'm clear from what you've just said to me, in terms of kind of these areas that you say are kind of between Jarrow and the sea, that kind of, I guess you're saying in terms of reflect kind of openness or countryside?
Yes,
basically
it was the corridor of green. Place, yes. To prevent all the things that moderate or whatever you want to call them, they were all, that's, the green belt was put there to prevent everything that the green belt points to.
I think in terms of your representations, Ms. Sendell, you've kind of referred to, I think it's the roundabout just down here. There's a view sort of looking south to Town End Farm that I think you've suggested I take into account.
I took some, unfortunately, not very good photographs on the day, which show these views of the hill from various points. And I think the one, especially from the roundabout at what we call out the Astor roundabout, really shows what would happen to the view across that land. And unfortunately, there's also was an application for a battery storage plant at the electricity substation there, which was thrown out by the council, but I believe it's now being appealed. So to me, it all just adds insult to injury, shall I put it that way? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sendell. Okay. I should have said at the start of this session, obviously I've been to the area, been to various kind of, seen the site. Obviously the new, is it the downhill lane interchange, which is next, or relatively new, downhill lane interchange on the A19. It's obviously adjacent to the site. And I've been to look at things from the Town End Farm perspective and up onto the Bolden Hill. There seems to be a multitude of kind of paths, whether they're official or not, that allow you to walk in that area. Hopefully I didn't do any harm, but that's given me an appreciation of the area. Thank you for that on Greenbelt. In terms of heritage, there's probably one of the few sites I've had to deal with so far where there's a heritage dimension, but there are various heritage assets close to this proposed site. I'm probably looking to Mrs. Routledge at that end of the table. Obviously the plan is accompanied by a heritage impact assessment document which has considered the various, I think there's a small number of grade 2 listed buildings on the downhill lane as you go towards West Bolden. I don't know, Mr. Routledge, if you can just explain how that's been looked at, and ultimately I think only one of the heritage assets has kind of come into the site contributes to its what we call in planning term its heritage significance.
Yes, so we assessed the site through the heritage impact appraisal. We developed the methodology of that with the help of Historic England, and we're both in agreement that the only listed building that would potentially be impacted by the allocation would be the downhill house, and we both agreed that this would result in less than substantial harm to significance, and as a result we we put some text in the actual policy to reflect that in SP7. But the detail would be in the historic environment chapter of the local plan, which would be policies SP24 and policy 43.
Thank you. And just so I get my bearings from that kind of group of various kind of listed buildings, Downhill House, is that the larger pale coloured building?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I note the council's obviously entered into a statement of common ground with Historic England, so I've got that in front of me. Mr. Sendall, I think from the wider impact on the environment, obviously we're looking here at these kind of the group of the older buildings, Downhill Farm, Downhill House, as you kind of start to ascend up Downhill Lane towards West Bolden. The impact on those is kind of...
Well, obviously I considered it, and just like the council themselves have just said, I fully agree with what they've said about what we know as colloquially as Schilling's house, which was the first aged miners' homes in the country, apparently. So there you go. But I feel the same way as the council about that.
Thank you. I'm going to move on in terms of my agenda. In terms of item 5...
Sorry, Seth, to cut across you. I was just going to add one more thing before you close that element down. More just to assist your consideration. When we looked at the historic buildings as well, the listed buildings, we would concur as well that the farmhouse, Downhill House, is the one to look at. But I think when you'll observe, if you've not already noticed on site, sir, is that the gable that faces the site is the south-facing gable with no windows. So in terms of the relationship with the sort of setting of the surrounding land, it very much is the fields that are visible from the primary rooms that are within and the windows. So they are all on the front elevation, which faces west. So the relationship in terms of setting with that listed building is all primarily to the west. So, and I think the other thing worth pointing out as well, with our likely approach to the sites, the overhead cables will essentially contain the development parcels to the south. So that will naturally also allow for some standoff there between the development to come forward and the proximity to the listed buildings. Sorry, sir, I just wanted to add that little point.
No, that's fine. If I move on too quickly, please. Yeah, I said I wanted to understand or hear from people's perspectives. Obviously, I'm particularly focused on where there's soundness concerns, but I think it's helpful, Mr. Smith, on that point. Okay, I will now move on to item 5. As with other Greenbelt, proposed Greenbelt alterations, one of the considerations is whether the location would be well served by public transport and whether there be scope to secure a genuine choice of transport modes. Can I first turn to the council in its response to my matters issues question 5.44 in terms of how it's looked at this for this particular site. Mr. Clifford.
Thank you, sir. Yes, the council does consider that it is well served by public transport and there will be a genuine choice of transport modes. The site sits close to bus stops and is served regularly by bus services, which go to both Sunderland and Newcastle and various areas within South Tyneside. Table 7 of the council's response to MIQ 5.44 provides details to bus services, and we'd just like to add to that bus service 50 is not referenced in that table, but that's a bus service on Downhill Lane, which with stops to the south and with a half-hourly 6-day service to South Shields, Washington and Durham, and an hourly Sunday service. Thank you.
Thank you. That covers public Mr. Mail.
I was just going to reiterate about the genuine choice of transport modes, in that there's been significant investment made as part of the Townhill and Testo schemes. There is direct linkages quite amenable to the site that provide sort of off-road bridleway connections into the wider Bolden areas, but there's been a significant infrastructure improvement as part of Downhill. There's a segregated bridge now that provides accessibility across the A19 in addition to an existing bridge, and that provides wider connectivity to the likes of Washington, Gateshead and further afield. Thanks. Sure.
And into the IAMP?
Certainly, sir, yeah.
Thank you. Return to, so I've forgotten your name for...
Dr. Owen.
Okay.
Oh, right, it's on there. I just wanted to pick up a correction in our statement that we'd put in. For this, in para 2.15 about service 50, we'd said it was an hourly service. That's a typographical error on our part. It should have said half-hourly service. I just wanted you to be clear on that, sir. And otherwise, we support the council's contention here that the site is a good site in terms of its accessibility, both the bus services and clearly at the north side where the service 50 runs, whilst there's few bus stops up on Downhill Road at the moment, sorry, Downhill Lane, certainly additional bus stops could be provided to serve the site from Downhill Lane. And I think the position of the site in relation to IAMP and Nissan and the connectivity that we have to those development areas, but also into Townhill Lane, the Townhill Farm area, I think it makes it a good site in terms of accessibility. Is it that one?
Mr. Garland, please.
Thank you, sir. I just want to make a quick point just to reiterate that the connectivity back into Town and Farm and the bus services and pedestrian links back in are all logically as described as the opportunities and the frameworks document, all logically come back in from the corner onto Boston Street, which is one of the representations that we've made previously, and the Tetra Tech document which was submitted didn't consider that side of things, and we think that is a key principle we accept. And I now understand, as I didn't previously, that may require some consultation, further consultation with Sunderland. But certainly in terms of discussions that we've had throughout the site promotion is where people will look, belong to, go to school to catch the bus from, has to link back to that connectivity to Town and Farm.
And presumably from the excuse me, from the council's perspective, in terms of the plan making, the rationale for choosing this location, not only in terms of greenbelt impact, but presumably its sustainability credentials of this location are interwoven by its being adjacent to the built-up area of Sunderland.
Yes, sir, that's correct. That's a major advantage to the site location. Obviously, it means there's cross-boundary impacts, which we are addressing. We've got very strong liaison with Sunderland, but it does provide that really key advantage.
Thank you. Are there any further points in relation to transport, public transport? No. In which case, I'll move on to whether a safe and suitable access to the site can be achieved, whether there be any significant off-site highway impacts. This was my question 5. 0.45 issues here might be slightly different from other parts of the borough, given that we referred to earlier the improvements at Downhill Lane Junction on the A19, but nonetheless, presumably there are more localised considerations that have been looked at, and obviously the National Highways aren't here. I don't think they've raised any issue in relation to this site and the A19.
Yes, sir, that's correct. In terms of safe and suitable access, it was assessed through the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment process, and no concerns were raised. We consulted the council's transport team. The site has been assessed in the local road network assessment, and that assessment shows there are 3 junctions which would require mitigation and provides a high-level summary of the mitigation required. And the study did not assess the impact on any of the junctions as being severe.
Thank you for that. So anything anybody else wishes to add in relation to the highway network? Mr. Garland?
Again, apologies for sounding like a broken record and being quite predictable, but the same point clearly applies to that as well as bus connectivity and pedestrian access.
Thank you. Mr. Sendall, please.
You've obviously, as you've said, you've been on the road system, so you'll have been downhill to where it meets the A184 in Bolton. A bypass has been mooted through Bolton since 1932 and has never happened. So it was considered necessary then. And at every local plan, we've been told that it's going to be okay. We can sort the problem out. The big thing they did after the last public inquiry was to put in various traffic calming measures between basically the start of Bolton and the end of Bolton, round about where the Greyhound Stadium is. Now, yes, they have helped in that they've slowed the traffic down, but as you'll appreciate, twice a day it becomes almost impossible, at especially that junction, which is presumably why most people try to avoid it. And okay, you can put a roundabout in, you can put lights in, but you're then going to have a roundabout or lights, then another roundabout within 100 metres, and then at the top of the hill there's another set of lights. It's going to just add more and more problems to the Boltons and the people who live there. And I just think that for once some notice should be taken of this, and that the people of Bolton should be considered in this and not just saying, okay, you're going to be all right, which, you know, it seems to be the general approach.
Thank you. I don't know whether for Helen's Land or from the council in terms of what's been identified. For Helen's Land, please.
Thank you, sir. I'll just direct you to appendix, I think it's C in our statement, which shows some traffic diagrams. See if I just get that. Sorry, appendix D. Fiddling around with tiny screens, I'm afraid. That shows some traffic diagrams where we're at, which is showing where we think the traffic that the site is likely to generate will be distributed on the local road network. If you have a look at those diagrams, sir, you'll see that we're anticipating that most of the traffic coming out of the site will pass to the west to go towards Downhill Lane interchange and distribute up and down the A19. Some traffic will, I'm sure, go through to Bolton, and we've indicated a level of traffic going in that direction. But I'd say that's very much the minority direction for traffic flow. Well, we hear from the council that there's some junctions which may need some improvement to deal with cumulative impacts, and obviously we're quite happy to take on board the proportionate, share of such work should they be necessary on further evaluation during the planning application process.
Thank you. I mean, I could probably track back through the IDP, so Infrastructure Delivery Plan, and the local highway network assessment, but is the junction that Mr. Sendall's referring to at Downhill Lane and the A184. Is that one of the identified junctions, Mr. Mayle?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
And is it similar to what I heard this morning in relation to the site in East Bolton, that at this stage it's kind of recognised as a high-level intervention, but the precise and the form and nature of that intervention still needs to be...
Yes, sir, that's correct. It's high level strategy, high level setting out the mitigation that's required, but it's not drilled down into the sort of level of detail you would get at a planning application stage.
I think just to come in, sir, the slight difference between that of the East Bolton sites is this isn't currently traffic signalised. So again, that detail will come forward in the application, but this is a junction that acts as a standalone T-junction without any form of traffic signal intervention yet. So that might be a consideration which may be teased out during the transport assessment by the applicant.
I think you mentioned again this morning, Mr. Mayle, in terms of looking, I think, more widely at the A184 as it's going. I'm going to probably slip into the wrong terminology, the Boldens, but whether it's east and west in this instance, in terms of things like cycleway enhancements, and just generally looking at the overall condition and circumstances in that corridor.
Yes, sir. Obviously, it was alluded to this morning, and I've got no doubt will be referenced. It is a residential bound carriageway. That said, what we have got is good linkages between the East Bolton village to that of the connection with Sunderland City Council and then onwards. But there's an appreciation that where possible, if the intervention allows, we will pursue active travel corridors and improvements. Namely, probably off the 184, as I cited earlier this morning, Gordon Drive, South Lane, and as well as there's appropriate probably considerations to give along Bridle Path and indeed Dype Lane to then connect to Hilton Lane. But again, I would suggest that that detail is further refined as part of the planning process.
Thank you. If there's nothing further on highways before I move off that point, are people okay to continue going, or is now time to take a break? Are you okay, Mr. Sendall? To keep going? Yes, keep going, yep, okay. I can move on to then item 7, landscape and biodiversity considerations, as the council referred to earlier when we're looking at greenbelt compensatory improvements for the greenbelt. You haven't adopted all of the kind of the potential options given the proximity of local wildlife site, etc. But does the landscape setting, when we're looking at Bolton Hill and the local wildlife site, provide a reason for not allocating this site, or are they factors to be taken into account in terms of the layout, design, and how the site comes forward? I'll turn to the council first, and then I'll bring in Mr. Sendall on this point as well.
Okay, yes, so the proposed allocation is within close proximity to Bolton Hill, which is identified as an area of high landscape value in policy 39 of the local plan. And also, as previously referenced, it is within close proximity to the Downhill Old Quarry local wildlife site and local geodiversity site. The site also falls within a wildlife corridor due to its proximity to existing water courses and core sites as identified in the wildlife corridor review document. I think the key sort of mitigation that the council is sort of proposing to act as to reduce impact on these factors is the area of open space to the northwest of the site, which is included within the site frameworks document, which would act as a buffer, an area of open space to the Bolton Hill area and the local wildlife site. And you'll note that in the council's response to the MIQs, we have sort of proposed that it should be minded we could look at including some text within the key considerations to strengthen that policy in terms of ensuring that open space is identified within the policy word and to ensure that the buffer is delivered.
Thank you, Mrs. Lamb. Is that it's paragraph 5193? So there's not a precise form of wording before me now, but were I to go down that route, the council could pick that up as an action point or something to consider. Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. If I can bring in, I'm going to bring in Mr. Sendall. I think in terms of your representations, your concern, I think about impact on the general, notwithstanding the green belt. This is currently green belt. It's then the separate issue of the landscape quality, the ability to kind of see and appreciate Bolden Hill at this location.
This is at the western end of the escarpment where it tails down to what I would say general level roundabout. So it is at the end of the escarpment, and it's good to be able to view that and to be able to see the hill as a hill. I think if you've been on the Sunderland side of it, you see, I mean, they're practically built to the top of the hill now.
Is that as you're coming up? Is that as you're coming? Do you pronounce it Hilton? Is it Hilton
coming
Lane?
up Hilton Lane? Yes.
Yeah.
And as the lady has just said, it's considered to be an area of high landscape value, and I think it's valued because it leads a sort of tranquility to the area, if I can put it that way, where you feel that you're in that area, you're out in the countryside. It feels rural. Of course, it could be much better, but it is what it is at the moment. I know I'm the only person sitting here, but the people that I know in the village all appreciate that area and the views, you know, especially, as I say, from that junction at the roundabout at what we call the Asda roundabout. Now, over the years, I've obviously walked that area a lot. Initially, when I was young, you could walk anywhere under the country code, and as long as you behaved yourself, you were okay. Then Townend Farm came, and it was a bit like the Wild West. In some ways it still is. It doesn't seem to be quite so bad, but unfortunately, for the last couple of years, with my leg, I haven't been able to walk the path that you know.
Okay, I think, Ms. Sendall, that people might just, people will not agree with that description of Townend Farm. I think.
Well, of course, I quite agree. But I'm telling you what people think.
Okay.
They may not like it, but that's what people think. It is getting started. It's starting to get better, I must admit. Well, okay, I'm sorry if you take exception to it.
Okay,
I mean,
maybe we can just focus on the agenda item here is on the landscape and biodiversity. So I think we should just stick on that,
I'll
please.
put it in a different way. There is still damage to the environment, not just from that area, from a lot of areas where youths, shall we say, go onto the hills. It has affected the wildlife, or it certainly had up till the time, I say, when I couldn't walk anymore. But like yourself, you're not quite sure now where you should walk and where you shouldn't walk. I knew everyone in the area at the time. That is not the case now, where I used to wander through the old quarry because I knew the farmer, to the quarry that became a sand quarry and then became an infill quarry. And there was a definite decline in wildlife that I could see at that time. to put more houses there and to bring more people into the area, I can only say it will make matters worse.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn to other people now. Mr. Smith, do you want to introduce, bring in a colleague on this point?
Yes, it will be Mr. Streets speaking in a second. I think the one point I just wanted to add to that, and it's probably in response to, or it supplements what Mrs. Lamb has said, and also just hopefully provides a bit of comfort to Mr. Sendell, is that in terms of development approaching the hills on all sides, I think working with the site constraints, we have got those overhead cables that run towards the northeastern part of the site, so that will largely contain the development parcels and retain at least some green space before you get to the Baldwin Hills. But that said, it still will function in terms of a very important part of the development, doing other things. That's probably a neat segue to bring in Mr. Streets.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yes, James Streets from OS Ecology. We're working as ecologists on behalf of Helen's Land. We would consider that the site is generally of low habitat value, comprising agricultural fields. The opportunities granted by the site in terms of that northeastern green space corridor provides both a buffer, so functional barrier, but also linkage between the local wildlife site to the east, which is in Sunderland, Downhill Meadows, as well as Downhill Quarry. Obviously, as part of the scheme, we'd have to provide biodiversity net gain, which again provides us an opportunity to really enhance those habitats in that location, and to diversify habitats and actually increase the potential value of the local wildlife site that's to the northeast as well.
Okay, got linkages to local wildlife sites, Downhill Quarries. What was the other one?
Sorry, Downhill Meadows.
Downhill
to the east.
Meadows.
Yes, yeah.
And that's in Sunderland.
It is.
Yeah. And in terms of the points that have been raised about the current condition of the local wildlife sites and potential management issues, does this allocation potentially present some benefits, or is the key not to kind of, I think, to manage access or?
So yes, the green space corridor provides an opportunity to provide managed dog walking as probably a key impact of local residents accessing that site. So as part of the scheme, you could provide all-weather terrain to provide a circular walk around the site using that green space to both manage access from the proposed allocation site, but also other sites within the local area that may also access that site currently.
Okay, is there anything further people wish to say in relation to landscape and biodiversity considerations? I've got no further questions on this. No. In which case, come to item 8 of my agenda, which is around proximity to Sunderland's administrative boundaries and just infrastructure requirements more generally. I appreciate the council has entered into a statement of common ground with Sunderland and has identified I think it is a proposed modification. Yes, sorry, I'm just trying to track through all the various things that are going on. But I think, yes, there is a proposed, I was getting confused with Gateshead and, yeah, no, Sunderland, yeah, there is a proposed modification as well in terms of, I think the council's agreed to, in terms of recognising its proximity to Sunderland and that the draw on some of the services and infrastructure may happen within Sunderland's administrative area, not an uncommon occurrence with plan allocations these days. I wonder if the council could just take us through potential infrastructure requirements that are likely to arise from this site. I mean, in terms of the policy itself, it doesn't identify any kind of specific infrastructure requirements, notwithstanding it's been told it's the second largest allocation, housing allocation in the plan. Nonetheless, it's not required to provide specific infrastructure on site, so the assumption must be, if it's required and necessary, proportionate contributions if there are capacity issues. Mr. Clifford.
Thank you, sir. So as you say, there will be cross-boundary impacts, and that's reflected in the statement of common ground between the two councils. So firstly, regarding school places, as was referenced this morning, school places planning team looked at primary school places across 6 planning areas. So planning area 6, which is the villages, looks at that area as a whole, so it looks across Whitburn, Cleydon and the Boldens, and there is capacity, and we've tested capacity and demand in both areas, so Sunderland and South Tyneside. I say we, Sunderland obviously tested their own capacity and we liaised with them, and clearly given the location of the proposed site, there's potential for demand to be met in either or both locations, and once parental preferences become clear, the two authorities will work together to ensure a coordinated approach to delivering that capacity. And there's also capacity regarding school places on the South Tyneside, secondary school places on the South Tyneside side, as was referenced this morning. In this planning area 9 for secondary school places, it would be Bolden Secondary School. In terms of proximity, as was referenced this morning, there are bus services along downhill. As was referenced this afternoon, I should say, there are bus services along Downhill Lane connecting to Bolden, but also I think it's really important to point out the proximity of the site to Sunderland confers a number of advantages. For example, it's less than 100 metres from Townend Academy in Sunderland, and regarding healthcare, the site is less than 1 kilometre away from the Bunny Hill Surgery and 1.3 miles away from Castletown Medical Centre. Moving forward, the Council is committed to engaging with Sunderland City Council when determining the necessary infrastructure, if any planning applications, when they come forward, ensuring that that necessary mitigation for infrastructure requirements is secured as part of any planning consent. And that's reflected in the modification which you referred to. Proposed modification is ensuring that the impacts on the neighbouring authority of Sunderland are mitigated. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of that proposed modification, a note in the statement of common ground, Helen Land, and presume also GF White, one additional kind of caveat to that proposed modification in terms of the wording where, was it where justified and necessary, or something to that effect?
Yes, so that's right. That is, it's a tweak upon the arrangement that's been agreed between the two councils. I think just to give you a live example for explaining that, I mean, firstly, it's just to bring it in line with national policy, so it's consistent in terms of the 3 tests. But if we take education as a for instance, there's a reasonable chance, yes, that the development will generate pupil place requirements. I think as it stands, we've read obviously the council's hearing statements. it sounds like there's capacity to absorb some of those places, but possibly contributions will be required for the remaining. That situation is quite volatile and can change year on year. If there's a situation where suddenly there does become capacity in the local schools, it would still be an effect of the development, but would not need to be mitigated, if that makes sense. So it's just some clarifying wording.
Excuse me, Mr. Garland.
Yeah, I think we'd agree with that, sir. I think we obviously don't want to have double counted, but it needs to be assessed at the time of the application. I think we'd agree with that.
The council, I don't think, has agreed to that, or is not accepting that.
No, because it's a matter of law. Planning requirements have to be both reasonable and necessary. There's no reason, you don't need to embellish the requirement with those caveats.
Various tests, Mr. Smith, when we're looking at planning obligations.
I mean, I think I've not really got anything further to add, so I'll probably leave it with you. It's obviously a key consideration, given what we discussed at the start of the session. The list of key considerations and indeed the policy might change somewhat, but I think it would be consistent with national policy in the 3 tests if we had the wording added.
Thank you. Leave that with me to look at. I appreciate the respective positions. As I say, I've looked at the site, the relationship to existing development on Town End Farm, seen the various facilities there are in that part of Sunderland, the bus routes, etc. So I understand the relationship to this site. I had nothing further I wanted to cover in relation to infrastructure and proximity to Sunderland. Statement of common ground with Sunderland was helpful, so thank you for that. So we've kind of come on to the last kind of 2 items for this afternoon, which kind of one will sort of logically feed into the other. Obviously, this is one of the sort of a sizable allocation in terms of the number of homes anticipated. Obviously, the scope to deliver a mix of housing on here, including affordable housing. But as I understand it, there's some dispute as to whether this site can viably deliver 20% affordable housing. Is that the position from Mr. Smith for Helen's Land?
So I think the viability work was undertaken in 2023, and I think it followed some fairly crude assumptions. I think at that stage, the policy requirement assumptions assumed overall circa £9,500 per dwelling. That will have been based on assumptions at the time in 2023, which it'll be interesting to see how that closely aligns with the asks, obviously, at the application stage. I think when the council tested it, it found that the development could stomach the affordable housing provision plus the majority of that, I think 8,600. But I think obviously a lot has happened since. There's obviously volatilities in the market and a lot of other things that can affect the variables. But I think and I can invite Miss Rumble back to the table if she feels necessary, but I think there has been background viability work done, and we're confident that even plugging in the 9,000 odd figure, that we're comfortable that the scheme can accommodate the 20% affordable and the policy asks.
So just so I'm clear on the position, so you're not seeking a modification to the plan to amend the 20% affordable housing? Ms Rumble?
No, sir.
Okay, that's direct, short, thank you.
Just to probably add to what Chris has just noted there, we are a registered provider of affordable housing as well, albeit it's a separate company within Helen's, and we do strive to deliver the affordable requirements where possible.
Thank you. I appreciate those kind of representations were made at a kind of a more unified time. Mr. Garland, is there anything further you wish to add on the viability point?
You're correct, sir. There were a joint submission, and there's nothing that's changed in that regard. We've certainly found nothing more adverse on the site from our point of view, so I think we'll concur.
Thank you. And from the council's perspective, obviously, I think you're going to direct me to the local plan viability work that Mr. Newham has prepared.
Thank you, sir. Yes, in addition to the whole plan viability work that Mr. Newham undertook, also undertaken was site-specific viability work. So that's helped inform the council's view of the site, and also in terms of the affordable housing requirement was determined through the whole plan viability work.
Thank you. Well, I don't think this is perhaps the significant issue that I perhaps anticipated it might be, so that's helpful. Thank you. So finally come to the last item on this afternoon's agenda around delivery timeframes. Notwithstanding where we started this afternoon's discussion, the statement of common ground, I think the council's evidence through the strategic housing land availability assessment has this site delivering in 2028, 2029. I invite the council first, and then I'll come to others. Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. Like you say, notwithstanding discussions we've had earlier today and earlier this afternoon, we've assumed a build-out rate of approximately 40 dwellings per hectare on that site, which is slightly above the SHLAR methodology, but I think all throughout the plan process, the excuse me, promoters have indicated that that is a realistic and achievable build-out rate in that area.
Okay. Thank you. And in terms of just the general build-out rates, I mean, a relatively large site, 40 dwellings a year broadly for most of the kind of the plan period, is that effectively based on we call it one outlet, but basically one developer scheme happening consistently, or is that a reflection of kind of market location conditions? Is it conservative?
I think the short answer, sir, is that it's probably all still to be revealed. I think there's the opportunity for more than one developer or at least outlet on site. And I think, as Mr. Rumble's mentioned before, there is the registered provider arm as well. So I don't think there's any dispute between the parties about the delivery assumptions, start times, and that is also replicated within the statement of common ground.
And in terms of delivery, I mean, first units 2028, 29. This is a site that requires alteration from the green belt, so presumably people are waiting for the adoption of a local plan rather than pursuing very special circumstances outside of the local plan. So that's a process that needs to run its course, and we'll see where that takes us. But I think probably the most positive scenario would be 2026, early to mid 2026. There's then got to be a planning application. Construction starting on site even before dwellings are completed. I'm afraid this is a discussion we had on another site this morning. It feels very optimistic.
And I don't know, so I'd be minded to potentially disagree on that. I think we at Lichfields, you probably had the start to finish aired before you on many occasions around the examining local plans, and I think we've considered it in terms of the lead-in times and in light of that information as well, and I think we think it's realistic.
If I had £1 for every time somebody brought start to finish in front of me at an appeal, I'd have some pounds. It must be the most regularly cited document, but then, if you're dealing with housing land supply casework, I take the point, but I just wonder if we take a practical, pragmatic look at this, thinking back to where we started in relation to potential modification to this policy. Council's mentioned the word master plan, trying to kind of coordinate and get kind of comprehensive approach that I think everybody is saying they want to see on this site. That seems, to my mind, to infer potentially a little bit more time, and whether, you know, first delivery is probably more realistically 2029, 2030.
I think a large part of that would depend on whether or not it's an outline application that comes forward eventually, or a detailed application. And again, it's not to be determined, but there have been interested parties behind that would like to take the site on. So there's every chance it could end up being a detailed application that would at least make up some of that time.
Mr. Garland?
Thank you, sir. I'm ever an optimist, and it's the hope that kills you with planning, unfortunately. But I'd see that as achievable. If you're talking about an early 26 adoption of the plan, a year with an allocated site, with all the surveys done, gives you another year to mobilise and start selling. So I can see it could be done at that timescale, subject to its journey through planning, and particularly if you're talking about the extension of Town End Farm, it's pretty quick on site. You know, we don't know of any major abnormals, any particular on costs which are problematic. So I think it's probably achievable, but subject to how long it takes for the actual application to be heard. And in terms of sort of representation on the sales per year, it's 3 and a bit per month, which isn't an unusual assumption for 1 unit. 2 units, 2 flags upselling there would probably comfortably do that. There's probably demand in that area to match that if you can build them to that rate, which one builder could. If they're selling well, 2 almost certainly could. So I don't think the assumptions are out of the way.
Thank you. I'll reflect on that, but I think coming back to the council from, again, discussion similar to this morning, I mean, if I felt that this was a site in terms of a trajectory needed to go back slightly by 1 year, I mean, we're looking at 20 dwellings in the overall picture at this moment in time. I mean, were to arrive at that conclusion, would there be a consensus that sort of figure, excuse me, that figure of 20 dwellings could be easily recovered or recouped within the remainder of the plan period? I mean, it's another 3 or 4 a year on top of what's...
That must be the case. Plus the fact we're not talking about insuperable or very, very difficult structural issues, like, you know, having to fund up front huge amounts of infrastructure or infrastructure provision. And that applies probably to all the allocations, unlike some other major allocations I'm sure we've all worked on in the past. So I wouldn't be unduly pessimistic about achieving these rates.
Thank you. I'll see if I can find some optimism. But I want to add this now because, as I indicated to the council this morning, very keen to ensure a plan-led approach and that the trajectory is central to that. So thank you. Are there any further final points people wish to raise in relation to site delivery? Mr. Smith?
I think the only one final observation just to make as well is that any sort of illustrative planning that has gone over the years, and you will actually find a version of that plan that's appended to the ecology note that was submitted along with our hearing statements. We did actually know some reflection. There is actually a housing mix appended to that, which, when considered against the SHMAR, is slightly heavier on 4-bed houses as opposed to what the SHMAR is recommending in terms of fewer 4-bed houses and a greater proportion of 2 and 3. So we're very mindful of obviously density and some of the green belt recommendations there, but I think the other point of optimism, just to leave you with, sir, that the allocation itself actually is an indicative yield of 400, so we're not proposing to necessarily formalise changing the trajectory or delivery rates, but there's every chance that if a scheme was to come forward that's more reflective of the SHMAR, that it's likely that it would be in excess of 400 on the site.
Thank you. Thank you for those contributions this afternoon. I think it's obviously a significant and high priority piece of work from the first item on this agenda. again, I'll liaise with the council through the programme officer on kind of broad timetables and scope of what I'll be expecting. And as I've indicated at previous sessions, I'll then take a view, if there's an outcome from that process, whether people are kind of consulted and engaged to provide further comment on that before stage 2, or whether we wrap it into stage 2 and ultimately potentially through proposed main modifications which would go out for consultation. So that will be dealt with in due course. Okay, there's nothing further then for this afternoon. A nice earlier finish compared to other days, so that's always welcome. We'll be back in this room. I'm afraid it's a 9:30 start, and we've got Cleedon and then Whitburn. Thank you.